So I talk to a lot of people and I get lots of questions, and one of the main problems that keep coming up that I'm seeing people struggle with when on a carnivore diet is digestive problems. Whether they're dealing with constipation or loose stools, or they just feel like they're not breaking down their food. It's very common to experience digestive issues when on or when starting a carnivore diet. So in this video, I'm going to outline the main contributing factors that cause these problems and give my best tips and advice on how to overcome them and troubleshoot anything that comes up. I am a nurse, so talking about digestion and bowel habits is literally my day job, so I am happy to discuss. This is the Bristol stool chart. A healthy stool is either a type 4 or a type 5. It's meant to be soft, snake-like, feel easy to pass, and sink in the toilet. On a carnivore diet, it is absolutely possible to experience all forms of these stools from type 1 to type 7. I would also go as far as adding a type 8, which is like an explosive type 7. It's not good, and hopefully you can avoid it. The main factor to carnivore digestion is your fat intake. The amount of fat you eat or do not eat is a major influence to the consistency of the stool you have. On carnivore, it's very common to experience loose stools or diarrhea, and this is largely due to the consumption of too much fat for your body's capabilities. When moving to a carnivore diet, it's very likely that you're coming from a lower fat, high carb diet. And because of that, you may not have enough of the substance called bile. Now, bile is a substance produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder and is responsible for digesting and emulsifying fat. The problem comes when you start a carnivore diet and very quickly increase your fat intake, but your body just isn't ready to handle this amount of fat, and you do not have the correct volumes of bile available in your gallbladder, because in the past you've not been eating much fat, so why would you have lots of bile? When you eat too much fat for the amount of bile you have, this can cause the undigested fat to run through your system and can result in loose stools. To help overcome this, there are a few things you can do. The first thing is to transition slowly. If you know that you've been coming from a lower fat diet, to suddenly go full carnivore and high fat overnight, this situation will be almost unavoidable for you because you will not have enough bile to digest and handle this massive increase in fat. So a slow transition from 2 to 6 weeks from whatever diet you're on to a carnivore diet will really help give your body the time to upregulate its bile production and be able to handle these higher quantities of fat. Other things you can do is avoiding rendered fat. Now, rendered fat is the hot liquid fat that comes off of beef mince, for example, that's left over in the pan. This fat is great, but at the start of carnivore diet, and especially when you don't have that bile production where it should be, because this sort of fat is already liquefied, there's not much digestion necessary, and it can very easily run straight through you. So avoiding rendered fat and focusing on solid fats from steaks or things like chicken skins, egg yolks, these things can help avoid loose stools and help you digest your fat better. If you can't avoid eating beef mince, because of course it's very affordable and not everyone can eat steak, breakfast, lunch and dinner, I know I can't. If you can't avoid the beef mince, you can try either choosing leaner cuts for a bit. Instead of getting 20% fat beef mince or ground beef, which would be the ideal, but if you can't tolerate that, you can go down to 15% or 10% and then gradually work yourself back up to that 20% as your body adapts and your bile production increases. Cooking your beef mince slightly rarer and not rendering out all that fat to liquid fat can help keep the fat solid and make it easier for you to digest. You can also choose to cook your beef mince all the way and render out all the fat, but then allow it to cool and then eat the fat once it's solidified and cooled down. This will be much easier to digest and hopefully will not run through you as quickly like rendered hot fat can. This goes for butter as well. If you're eating hot melted butter, that can also cause loose stools, run straight through you. So having your butter straight from the fridge when it's as cold and as solid as possible can help the digestion and hopefully prevent loose stools. If you're really struggling with beef mince and rendered fat in general, there is a hack you can do that I've done in the past. It's going to your butchers and asking to get the beef fat trimmings from steak offcuts. You'll just get a bag of solid white beef fat, and you can have it raw even, or you can cook it down, air fry it, roast it, and eat those solid fats as your fat source. A good thing here is the butcher will likely give it to you for free, or if not, extremely cheap. So it's a very affordable and accessible way to eat solid fat if you're really struggling with the rendered fat from beef mince or butter. Another thing you can implement to help you digest and break down your fat is to eat smaller meals more frequently. Ideally, I think the goal when approaching a carnivore diet is to be able to eat all your food in as minimal sittings as possible, maybe 1, 2, or 3 meals. But at the start, if you can't tolerate that amount of fat all in one go, it is much easier to break up your food sittings and have smaller amounts of fat more often. This will be much easier for your body to process and can help prevent diarrhea or loose stools. Over time, as your body gets used to eating more fat and you're consistent and you're patient, you will be able to tolerate more and more fat in one sitting and hopefully get yourself to the 1 meal or 2 or 3 meals a day. The next way fat can influence your digestion is the other way, and it can cause constipation. Now, constipation is associated with pain, bloating, feeling like you need to go but you can't, having overflow, which could indicate an obstruction in the bowel, and overflow would refer to liquidy stool coming out but still feeling like you need to go, indicating some sort of obstruction in your colon. The main culprit for constipation on a carnivore diet is under eating fat. Fat gives stool its soft, healthy consistency that allows it to pass normally. If you aren't eating enough fat, this fat can't make it to the stool. It will be used for other things, more important things like energy and nutrition, and it won't make it to your colon. And this can cause your stools to harden up and thus make you constipated. The best thing to do here is to just increase your fat. Basically just doing the opposite of what I just described for loose stools. You can eat lots of fat, rendered fat, butter, any sort of fat to help lubricate your stool and help it pass through. In severe cases of constipation, increasing your fat alone may not help you. If this is the case, I would recommend decreasing your protein and making your meals as high fat as possible. This could even mean a pure fat meal. If you eat pure fat to appetite, whether it's the beef trimmings or egg yolks fried in butter, or maybe just a couple scrambled eggs with lots and lots of butter, having a majority fat meal will almost certainly help with constipation. For both of these issues regarding your fat consumption, whether loose stools or whether constipation, a slow transition, consistency, and just a bit of patience is going to be essential here. You are changing your diet, you're introducing a whole new macronutrient profile to your body, which it just won't be used to. Sometimes some of these problems will come up and they may be unavoidable. So just be consistent, stay patient, and allow time for your body to adapt and upregulate itself. The next thing you need to understand is the impact of fiber or lack thereof on a carnivore diet. It's very likely that whatever diet you've come from in the past, you would have been eating fiber because we all think that fiber is essential in the diet. But the carnivore diet is a zero fiber diet. You don't eat any fiber, you don't eat any plants. And this will change the nature of your bowel habits. Fiber is an indigestible carbohydrate. We cannot break it down. So when we eat it, the only way for it to leave our system is to be excreted via stool. But when you stop eating this substance, you suddenly are going to have a lot less waste, because everything that you do eat on a carnivore diet, all the meat and the eggs and the fish, all of these things are extremely bioavailable and digestible to the body. It will utilize nearly everything you eat. Because of this, you are just going to produce less waste, and thus your stools are going to be smaller and potentially also less frequent. And I get this question all the time. People come to me really worried because they've not had a bowel movement in 2, 3, 4 days, and they're used to going every day or multiple times a day, and they're really worried that they're constipated. And this is when context is really important. On a zero fiber diet, you have less waste, so you may be going to the toilet less often just because you have nothing to excrete. If the only thing that's changed in your bowel habit is that you're going less often, but otherwise you don't feel bloated, you're not in pain, you don't feel like you need to go, there's no other signs of constipation except that decrease in frequency, I would suggest that you're not constipated and you're just experiencing normal zero fiber digestion. If of course you are experiencing pain and the bloating and you feel like you need to go but you can't, then yes, that is most likely constipation, and I would first address your fat intake like I spoke about earlier. The next important factor to help carnivore digestion is getting your salt and your hydration levels correct. Hydration and electrolyte level is very important to hydrate your stool. When your electrolyte levels are correct, it will allow water to pool into your colon and give your stool a soft, healthy consistency that allows it to pass well. If you are dehydrated or lacking in these electrolytes, you are going to risk being constipated, which is very possible, especially at the start of a carnivore diet, as low carbohydrate diets can result in a lot of water loss. It's very important to ensure you're getting lots of electrolytes. These are things like sodium and potassium and magnesium. And the best way to get these electrolytes is to salt your food. Find yourself a nice quality mineral salt. This can be Himalayan salt, rock salt, Celtic salt, sea salt. Any of these natural mineral salts will contain a good balance of these electrolytes as well as other trace minerals. I would suggest to avoid things like refined table salt. This salt is usually only sodium chloride and then maybe some other additives like anti-caking agents. They don't contain the broad range of electrolytes, and they will be lacking in the trace minerals that you can otherwise get from a high quality mineral salt. Other ways to make sure you're getting your electrolytes is you could supplement with an electrolyte in your water. In terms of electrolyte supplementation, you can also supplement individual electrolytes. In the cases of constipation, you could experiment supplementing with magnesium. There are lots of different versions of magnesium you can choose from. If you are experiencing severe constipation, you could experiment with taking magnesium citrate or magnesium oxide. These are known to have quite a strong laxative effect. So if that's what you need, it could help, but also be aware that if you are supplementing magnesium for other reasons, people like to take it to help them sleep or for relaxation, calming the nervous system, I would avoid those two, and I would suggest taking magnesium glycinate, which is something I like to take myself. You could also consider making yourself some sole water, which is where you get water and you saturate it with a mineral salt for 24 hours. This will produce a very salty electrolyte drink, which you can then dilute into water and sip throughout the day. Bone broth is also an option to help keep yourself hydrated. These broths are very salty, very high in electrolytes, and can help with a healthy hydration balance. Along with, of course, maintaining your electrolytes, it is also important to drink enough water. Drinking to thirst should be sufficient for most people. If you feel like you need a bit more guidance, aim for 1.5 to 2.5 liters of water per day, depending on your body size and the amount of activity you're doing. When you are hydrating, to support your digestion, it's best to avoid drinking water an hour before and an hour after eating your meals. To digest meat, especially the protein, you need to have a very acidic stomach pH. If you drink a lot of water just before or just after a meal, you can be diluting this stomach acid and making it much harder for your body to digest your meat. So to support your digestion and to ensure your stomach acid is as acidic as it can be, avoid water around your meal times if possible. The next point to consider when looking at your carnivore digestion is your addition of dairy into a carnivore diet. Now, dairy can be enjoyed on a carnivore diet, but I really think it's best to keep it to as minimal as possible. And one reason for that is dairy can contribute to constipation problems. There's a few reasons why people think this is the case. One thing is the presence of a substance called beta-casomorphines within dairy. These can act similar to opioids and bind to opioid receptors in the gut, and this can then lead to constipation. It's well understood in the medical world that patients on morphine are very likely to become constipated, and it could be the potential that dairy does a similar thing. Dairy is also very high in calcium, and a high calcium intake can deplete your magnesium levels because these two things exist in a balance. A body lower in magnesium is more susceptible to being constipated. So it's another thing to be aware of if you are consuming a lot of dairy and thus calcium. Another issue with dairy and digestive issues is the potential for intolerances. If you have a dairy intolerance, either to the lactose, the sugar, or the casein, the protein, this could show up in loose stools, in gas, in bloating, in digestive upset. If this is the case, then I would suggest you completely remove dairy from your diet. The tolerance to dairy can vary for people. It's something that you definitely need to find out for yourself. The best tolerated dairy products seem to be ghee and butter, and the worst seem to be soft cheeses, milks, and hard cheeses sort of sit somewhere in the middle. If you do have issues with dairy, another option is to consider trying to find some raw or unpasteurized dairy if that's possible from where you're from. Unpasteurized dairy will also contain additional enzymes which help the body break it down. These enzymes are lost during the pasteurization process when the dairy is heated up to very high amounts to kill certain bacteria. And it makes it far more common for people to be intolerant to pasteurized dairy but actually able to tolerate raw dairy fine. So that is just another bit of nuance and something to experiment with yourself. Not everyone has to completely avoid dairy. Learn what works for you, learn your tolerance, and adapt and troubleshoot around that. I'm now going to fire through some more nuanced aspects to things that can impact your digestion on a carnivore diet. The first thing is coffee or tea or caffeinated drinks. Caffeine is a known laxative. If you're already dealing with loose stools, also having caffeine in coffee or tea could really contribute to this and not help yourself. Caffeine in coffee or tea is also something called a diuretic. This means it makes you pee a lot. So if you are already maybe dehydrated or your electrolytes aren't quite right and you're experiencing some digestive issues, and then you're also peeing more than normal because of caffeine, this could really not help you and, send you into maybe further constipation. So just be aware that caffeine is a laxative and a diuretic and can cause you to be depleted in water and electrolytes. The next thing is sweeteners. Overconsumption of sweeteners can also have a laxative effect. I do think it's best on a carnivore diet anyway to remove sweeteners. I think getting that sweet taste out of your mouth is very important when trying to overcome carbohydrates and sugar addictions, as well as knowing consuming these sweeteners could be contributing to loose stools or any digestive issues that you may be dealing with. Movement is another big thing. If you are sitting still all day, you're not moving your body, this can slow down your digestion and contribute to constipation. Moving, any sort of moving, walking, running, sprinting, swimming, sports, yoga, lymphatic movements, all of these can help gut motility, keep your metabolism up, and just contribute to healthy digestion. Intolerances is another thing to be aware of. I've already mentioned dairy, which can cause loose stools, gas, bloating, or even constipation if you're intolerant. But there are many people that also experience intolerance to things like egg whites. Egg whites do contain some inflammatory properties that a lot of people can react to, and this can come out in gas, bloating, constipation, or loose stools. So if you've noticed that eating eggs does have some digestive upset for you, I would recommend to first experiment removing the egg whites, just having the yolk, and then potentially having to remove the entire egg itself if you feel like your stomach is not doing well on them. Meal times and meal sizing is also important to take note of. One thing to mention is people that do one meal a day. This may work for certain people, absolutely. But for others, having all your food condensed into one large meal may put a lot of strain on your system, and it may actually result in you finding it much harder to break down your meals. So for some people, actually splitting your meals up to 2 or even 3 can optimize your ability to digest and comfortably metabolize your food. Supplements are also something to be aware of. Certain supplements can have laxative effects. Just like I mentioned earlier, supplementing magnesium, especially magnesium citrate or oxide, can have a laxative impact. Supplementing vitamin C can also have an osmotic effect on your colon. It can cause water to pool into your colon, and that could potentially contribute to loose stools or diarrhea. On the flip side, if you are constipated, then considering either one of these supplements could actually help you open your bowels and get rid of your constipation. Meal etiquette is also just a very important factor to optimizing your ability to digest food. We digest food best when we are calm and relaxed, when our body is in rest and digest mode. So when you're coming to a meal, be calm, be relaxed, don't be stressed, don't eat when you're emotional. Be very intentional with when you're eating. This could also mean not eating right before going to bed, because it can make it harder to fully digest your food. It also means being present with your food. Try and avoid screens and scrolling on your phone when you're eating. Try and be present. Try and share it with people you love. Make it a nice experience. All of this will calm down your body, get you into a rest and digest mode, and really help optimize your ability to break down and digest your food. Under eating is also something to consider when optimizing your digestion. Now, under eating is actually an easy thing to do on a carnivore diet because the food is so nutritious and it's so satisfying that you just aren't hungry and you don't eat enough. This can cause issues in multiple ways. It could mean that you're under eating fat, which can cause the issues we described earlier. It could mean that you just have a small volume of food in you, and that small volume of food may prevent your food from smoothly and quickly traveling through your digestive system. Under eating, even on a nutrient-dense carnivore diet, could also result in malnutrition. And being malnourished will impact your ability to digest food. The digestive system is reliant on having adequate levels of things like B vitamins and zinc to produce your bile and to produce the digestive enzymes necessary to break down your fat and your protein. So without adequate levels of this nutrition, whether it's because you're coming from a nutritionally deplete diet or because you are just under eating on a carnivore diet, not having these adequate levels of nutrients can actually impair your ability to digest your food. Now, this can be a slight catch-22 because to optimize your nutrition, you need to optimize your digestion, but to optimize your digestion, you need to optimize your nutrition, and you could be going round and round and round. So if you feel like you are in this situation and you've tried everything else I've discussed in this video, but you still feel like there's something wrong with your digestion, like you're not being able to break down your food well, there is an option for digestive supplementation support. In an ideal world, I don't think you would need to supplement anything. I do think a carnivore diet done well, granted you are eating enough food and not under eating, should give your body everything it needs to function well. However, in the transitional stages, or if you're really malnourished, digestive supplementation support is absolutely an option to consider. So I'll very quickly run down some options for you now. In terms of fat breakdown and aiding that digestive process, you can supplement things like ox bile. This is exogenous bile that will help you break down the fats that you're eating. Bile supplementation is definitely recommended for someone that doesn't have a gallbladder in the first place, because you will very likely not have enough bile available to break down the fat necessary on a carnivore diet, but it can also help people going through the transitional phase of a carnivore diet who are really struggling to have enough bile and absorb the fat they are eating. As I briefly mentioned, stomach acid is another important part of digesting meat. We need to have a nice low stomach acid to break down protein. If your stomach acid isn't acidic enough, maybe due to things like medications, things like PPIs, protein pump inhibitors, like omeprazole and lansoprazole, these things can damage our stomach acid and in turn make breaking down meat much more difficult. If this may be you, you can take hydrochloric acid to help lower the pH of your stomach. You can also consider taking apple cider vinegar before a meal. This will again just lower the acidity of your stomach, but be aware if you are dealing with a yeast issue or a candida problem, to then supplement with apple cider vinegar would not be advised. Other digestive aids can include supplementing digestive enzymes like amylase, protease, and lipase. All these things will break down carbohydrate, proteins, and fats. And this can be especially helpful for people with pancreatic problems, as it's the pancreas that normally produces and releases these digestive enzymes. Digestive bitters are also an option for you, which will just stimulate your digestive juices and help kickstart your digestive process in order to help best break down your food. As I briefly touched on, we do need to have a healthy balance of zinc and B vitamins to produce the bile and to produce our digestive enzymes. If you feel like you're depleted of these nutrients, then supplementing them at the start of a carnivore diet is an option for you to ensure that you're going to optimize your nutrition to then be able to absorb the zinc and the B vitamins that you will be getting from your meat. So I think that's everything. Not everything will be relevant for everyone here, but I've tried to cover as many bases as I could to help you troubleshoot and navigate carnivore digestion. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful, and that's it. Okay, bye.